Welcome back to another episode of the Evolve Marketing Podcast. Today is a really special episode because it has been a year since we started publishing one episode a week. So, guys, this is episode number 52. And I don't know, I'm so happy that we made it this far. Honestly, I didn't think we were going to make it this far, to be honest, but we stay consistent and we're here for you guys. And yeah, we have here Brian with me as usual. What's going on, Brian?
Not much, man. That's a pretty big accomplishment. A full year from the moment we started. We didn't have any. We had hiccups, but we didn't have any missed episodes in the beginning, which is typically where the mistakes happen. I feel like, and yeah, we're episode number 52. So for the past 52 weeks, assuming this one actually goes live, when after it's recorded, then we will have hit our goal of releasing an episode every Wednesday at 8 a.m. for a whole year. And I think what we're going to talk about today is we're going to reflect back on the journey and try to help anyone who might be listening to this decide, should they start a podcast? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What are the pros? What are the cons? What kind of ways can it help your business? And I think so. We'll jump into today, huh?
Yeah, awesome. Honestly, starting a podcast, right? Why should somebody start a podcast? What do you have in mind, Brian? Why should somebody actually start a podcast?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the beginning when you asked me about starting a podcast and talked to me about partnering up and teaming up for one, and you really wanted to do it, and I really didn't want to do it. But that was because I had my own incorrect preconceived notions about what a podcast was. I didn't really understand podcasting really is what it was. Because I've listened to podcasts over the years, but the podcasts that I've listened to, first of all, a very select few. I've probably listened to 3 or 4 podcasts. Now, those 3 or 4 podcasts that I've listened to over the years, granted, I've listened to multiple episodes from all of them, but that's what I didn't understand. It's like everybody's got a podcast, everybody's creating a podcast. Why do I want to just be another podcast? And that was kind of what I was struggling with. And then I also thought about the podcasts that I had listened to over the years, and they were all from huge marketers. I mean, the biggest podcast probably in the world at the time that I started listening to them was like, well, I'm not that big, and why is someone going to listen to my podcast? And so I was adamantly against it. I was like, I'm not going to get any traffic. I'm not going to generate any leads. Why do I want to spend an hour a day plus potentially editing or whatever, worrying about this if it's not going to drive revenue for my business? So that's kind of initially where I was. And then we started talking to people with podcasts and, went back and forth a little bit more. And we decided very quickly, within a matter of probably 24 or 36 hours of seriously thinking about it, that, well, absolutely, a podcast is what I need. It's what I'm missing for my business, because first and foremost, it's long form content. As everything goes to reels and shorts and all that, we're lacking the long form content that we once used to have. There's blogs are becoming less and less popular, so there's not 3,000 word articles that deep dive in anything anymore. And it was like, yeah, we need podcasts. And so it's my job as a leader in this industry to create a podcast. And that was kind of the thing that started it all off for me. So that's one great reason right there. It's there's a need for podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stats are crazy. There's so many podcasts out there, and most of them they started, but then they don't keep it going. I remember when we reached maybe 5 episodes, I believe, and we started thinking about the YouTube analytics and the podcast analytics, and how it spikes really real fast high up, but then it goes down real quick after that. And we're talking about it, and we're like, okay, yeah, this is the point where people give up. And it happens with your business and everything. People get viral videos, and then they don't get viral videos for another week, and then people usually just like, okay, this is not gonna work, right? So that's how when we first started, that's what the main thing that I saw. We just gotta keep going, and we did. We kept going, and yeah, I mean, the reason why I brought it up to you the first time for Funnel Hacking Life to start the podcast was because I was getting really into podcasting. I was listening to other people, and I just liked the conversations that they were having, the questions that they were asking, and the learning experience, right? Because you're learning from the people that you're talking to, different marketers, different strategies, different stories, and then the main point was the stories. I wanted to know like what people had to bring to the table. I mean, we had some great stories here, from people getting fired, people getting laid off, people being in jail and then turning their life around, and people not even realizing that this is what they wanted to do, but then they did it, and then it blew up. It blew up for them. So just those stories were the main thing that I wanted to talk about in this podcast.
Yeah, it was part of the content that you wanted to add, and also probably selfishly for yourself, you wanted to hear those stories as well. And that kind of brings me to the second reason why I started to realize like starting a podcast would be so beneficial is, yeah, it's not going to bring a whole bunch of new people in until it maybe blows up someday, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. But what it is, it's a great way to strengthen a relationship with your existing leads, with people who are in your community. And it really gives them another outlet or media source to get to know you, which then strengthens the bond, which helps conversions of whatever you're offering now and whatever you're offering in the future. So that's really what's amazing about it is while we have gotten pretty close to 20,000 downloads, which I think is pretty good in our first year, we have so many comments from people that are like, I listen to every single episode, or this is, I've been listening every week since, episode 24 or whatever. And that's really cool. And it is because I think it's not just teaching the next strategy. I mean, yeah, that ends up rearing its head in a lot of our episodes because, I'm a marketing nerd who always likes to go deep dive into strategy, but the stories are really, I think, what are bringing people back and add another element to the education and the entertainment that is a podcast. I think it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, 20,000 downloads. And I don't know. I mean, for the metrics for podcasting, it's really difficult to pinpoint everything that's going on with your podcast because we could have 20,000 downloads, but then on Spotify, we have so many downloads too, or so many likes, so many people following us. On Apple, we have a different type of metric, analytics. So it's really hard to pinpoint where everything's coming from. But yeah, I believe it's more than 20,000, to be honest. We have a lot of listeners that start right now and now they're working their way down with all our archives, basically, So they're on it because if they like one episode, they're gonna like the rest, and then they just keep going, keep going. I have people in my Spanish community that they also like podcasts, right? And unfortunately, I don't have a podcast in Spanish, but some of my Spanish people they do speak English because they live in the United States. So I always just tell them, hey, go check out my podcast. It's I'm sorry, it's not in Spanish, it's in English, but you can get so much value out of them. And they show me their notes every Thursday. They show me their notes of what they're listening and just getting more information because that's exactly what this is. It's just more information.
It is, and it's presented in a little bit different way. And sometimes everything you do online when you're creating content, you're going to have the negative feedback. It doesn't matter if you're creating shorts or YouTube videos or writing emails. There's always going to be people who say, well, this is crap. And every now and then we'll get an email from someone who's like, oh my God, I listened to, 55 minutes of podcasts and I, learned one thing or whatever, and everything else was a waste. And to me, that's the beauty of podcasts is because it's more conversational. We don't have a script. We don't have slides. I mean, we know how the episode we want it to go, the track we want it to take, but we don't know where we're going to go at the 39-minute mark. We don't know where we're going to be at the 39-minute mark of the interview. Or even if we're just talking, the two of us, we don't know where we're going to be at the 39-minute mark of this video, but that's how you find the real golden nuggets. That's how you find the things that really, really change your perception in your business. And it reminds me of when we were at the mastermind where we first met in person. It's like when people are giving presentations on stage, that's great. But I would think it was Dave Sharp or someone who said, when people are done with the presentations, all the speakers and the presenters and the employees and Legendary Market are all sitting around having a drink, smoking a cigar. Like that's where the real good stuff comes out. And that's how I see a podcast. It's like you kind of give it free reign to just see what comes out. And I've forgotten more over the last 12 years about marketing and that than most people have learned if you're just getting started. And that's not to say I'm a genius who knows it all, but that's just the way it goes. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that part of blogging. But that's also, you talk about the interviews that we have and the golden nuggets that we get. I mean, I've learned so much just from hosting this podcast. That's a great reason to start a podcast. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, is for whatever reason, if you have a podcast and it's some sort of consistency, episode 1 might be hard, but by the time you get to 6, 7, and 8, like people will want to come on your podcast, and you can meet some amazing people that would cost a lot of money to get in a room with, but they just come on your podcast and you can pick their brain and ask them anything you want, right?
Yeah, especially when you mentioned about after hours talks. Let's call it that. You get me? How much information, like especially marketers, right? When they talk after hours, it's just golden nugget after golden nugget, ideas after ideas. And if somebody will just click record and then just record a conversation that marketers are just having, just how you say, late night having a drink with a cigar, you will get so much value out of it, just by somebody just hitting record and publishing that. It's just insane how much, and it's just having a conversation, right? This is exactly why we started this podcast. Now, if you're thinking, about starting a podcast, now you're probably thinking, okay, what am I gonna talk about? So you should have some type of structure, some type of theme, I guess, for the podcast. And when we first started this podcast, we talked about what name should we put, right? So we're thinking about names about the podcast. And then you were the one that actually came out with Evolved Marketing Podcast, because at least, I mean, you have 11 years of experience. I have 3 years of experience now. And it's just like we can see how things are changing, that the things that you were doing back then are not the same things that you're doing now. Same with me 3 years ago. Just 3 years ago, it's not the same thing I'm doing anymore than when I first started. It's completely different, and that's basically the theme that we kind of base off, the evolution of your marketing, and then the evolution of your life as well. Because people go through changes, and then changes might be good, changes might be bad, but that's basically one of the big topics that we wanted to center on, especially having guests from all over the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a beautiful point is, as your marketing evolves and you get more freedom, then your life evolves. And that kind of just magically worked its way into the selection of the title for this show. Is like, yeah, that's really what this is all about. Like I think about when I started in 2012, and as you mentioned or alluded to, the stuff I was doing back then isn't the stuff I'm doing now. And some of the stuff I was doing back then wouldn't even work now, even if I wanted it to. But also I think about the person that I was back in 2012 and just different goals. It was more of I got to make money, and I still focus on making money, but it's more about like, how do you not build a legacy necessarily, but how do you make money by helping other people and growing your brand and sharing information and teaching. I just got off of an hour and 40-minute teaching that I did for another group about TikTok ads. And that's really what it comes down to. It's just been the evolution for me and the way I view things and the way I view marketing and the business. And it's just really exciting. And now, I think about the evolution of the person that I've become even from a year ago when we started this podcast. What ways has this podcast changed you, if any, that you can think of, Andrei?
The main thing is I learned so much, from the people. I got in great ideas. I got in, bad ideas. I got in people that I agree with, and I got in people that I don't really agree with. So it's like I've gotten everything, but I'm not there just thinking about, okay, I don't like this person, I'm not gonna interview them, for example. You get me? It's just I'm gonna see what I can get from this guy, in a way where I want to learn. I want to learn. Even though I don't like somebody, I can still learn from that person. And then that's the beauty about you just having those conversations. And then also, as far as like, myself, this was completely out of my comfort zone. And I told you this from the beginning, talking for an hour or so with people. Like, I'm an introvert. I hate like being in a group of people and kind of sharing stuff. I hate speaking at masterminds. You get me? But I do it because I just need to get out of my comfort zone. And it has been challenging. This podcast has been challenging. I've been going through a lot in my personal life, but I'm still here, just trying to get better, in every sense as possible. But yeah, it's out of my comfort zone, but I'm here, and I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job so far.
I mean, I think you're doing an amazing job, and that's what's really been cool about our partnership is, yeah, we were friends and we knew each other and we respected each other and had learned from each other, but we never really thought about how our personalities might interact on a podcast. It was just like, hey, I like you, you like me, we do the same stuff, let's start a podcast. But what's been really cool for me to see, and it's really helped me become more self-aware having these conversations with you and guests, is you have strengths and I have strengths, and luckily they're a little bit different.
Yeah, they're
We are
not
a
the
little
same
bit
strengths. Yeah.
opposites. Yeah, exactly. And that obviously is a blessing, because that plays very well on a two-person podcast. Is you come at things from one angle, especially when we have guests. I come at things from another angle, and it kind of gives a little bit of something for everybody. But as I was saying, that's been part of the beauty of this podcast. Is it made me more self-aware about not only where my strengths are compared to like someone like you, who I watch and dive into your content and try to learn from you. It makes me realize, like, okay, I just need to focus more on my strengths and not try to become someone else. And like, I'm not trying to become you. Whereas before this podcast, I mean, like, well, he's crushing it on Instagram, so I got to go figure out Instagram. That was the wrong decision, right? Like, that's, and I realized that through being on this show, is like, nope, I don't need to learn everything. I just need to focus on my strengths. And it's been, not only have I had more sustainable success since I've realized that, but also, like, I'm happier. And what I mean is I wasn't unhappy necessarily, but it's like my job now with my marketing is super stress-free, because I just focus on my strengths and I go out there and deliver. Like when I delivered that presentation earlier today to another group of people, like, obviously that's part of my marketing. Yeah, I'm just giving value. I'm not selling anything, but I'm teaching people who are in this same game. So eventually they're going to track me down, get on my list, and hopefully I can sell them something in the future. But that was so easy for me. I didn't have to prepare. I just showed up and said, oh, here's what we're going to learn. And everyone loved it. And so that was really cool, is being able to focus on my strengths through kind of putting them up against you. But also, as I talk to other marketers, I get kind of the same thing. It's like, oh, I see they're really good at this, but they're not necessarily good at this, which I am. So why would I try to become them? I'll just focus on what I'm really good on. And I see it kind of the pattern repeat itself over and over and over again. It's like, don't try to become everybody. Just focus on what you can do the best.
Yeah. And also, it's almost like, don't try to be somebody else, right? Like, just be yourself. You can model other people. You can, there was a speaker at Funnel Hacking Live where he says you could swipe stuff from people. You get me? So swiping, right? You can swipe couple things from that person. And I actually saw it, because his whole presentation, he basically swiped it from another speaker the previous year. You get me? So it's just like, you can get some things out of other people, but as long as you stay true to yourself and who you are, you'll evolve even further. Another thing that I was thinking about also for the podcast, how many people, well, I guess this is an exercise that I want people to do. I want you to Google your name. I want you to go on Google and Google your name and just see what shows up. See if you're around, see if you're searchable, see if people can find you somehow. Because if you Google Brian, if you Google me, you're going to see all our episodes for the podcast. You're going to see our landing pages. You're going to see our websites. You're going to see everything that you can actually find about us in the marketing online world. So that's something that really cool that you can do, once you start getting more credibility. Just Google your name and then see what comes up.
Yeah. And if you're going back to the original topic of this episode, wondering if you should start a podcast, there's a perfect example. While there's tons of podcasts, you say, so many people quit and give up and don't make it past episode 6. A podcast is really low-hanging fruit for search. And that doesn't mean tons of people are going to go and find your podcast or search your podcast. What that means is, if you're marketing something and people are like, who is this John Smith guy? And then when you start typing in Google or YouTube, there's the predictive search, right? And if you go in and I'll do it behind the scenes, but if I go in and I start typing in Brian Brewer, it'll say Brian Brewer, marketing, affiliate marketing, podcasts, and I'm getting all these predictive searches. And I think it probably works better on YouTube than it does Google for me. But it's kind of like the idea of what a hashtag is or a tag is. It's like, what might people be looking for if they're searching you? And if they're going to go try to do their homework about you because you're marketing whatever. And they start typing in your name and then they see, oh, he's known for affiliate marketing. He's got a podcast, right? Or she's got a podcast, right? Like that's, like you said, credibility and instant authority. And that might be all people need to see to say, oh, I trust this person. I'm going to go buy their thing. And if you're selling high ticket stuff, man, that could be worth $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 or more. And I really noticed it when we were uploading our podcasts to YouTube, when we fill out the tags at the bottom. It's like when we first got started, we would obviously put our names in and it would suggest like Brian Brewer affiliate marketing and maybe one of my courses or something like that. But after a few episodes, it started saying Brian Brewer podcast. I was like, holy shit, I just got another one. I just showed up in predictive for another keyword. And like you said, it just kind of expands your footprint. And over time, it's a great way to go. And a podcast, once again, to get back to the point, can be low hanging fruit for search.
Yeah. So now, a complete beginner, right? Should they start a podcast? My answer to that is probably no. You get me?
All
Like
right.
you should at least
Why shouldn't they, Andrei? I'll give my reason, but I want to hear your reason first. Why should they not start a podcast?
Well, we are marketers, Brian. When we first started, we had other persons that actually started a podcast, but they weren't marketing to the core. You get me? So those people were not getting the views that they probably wanted to get. And then when we share our analytics to that person, he was like, wow, like what, how are you guys getting so many downloads right now? You get me? And you probably know who he was, who it is. But it's just like, we are marketers, we already had like the promoting side of it. We knew how to reach people. We knew how to get new eyes to our podcast. And we did it from the beginning. So that's why if you're a complete beginner and you're still starting your online business, or it doesn't have to be with online business or make money online. But let's say, you want to do a podcast about fitness and you're not fit, because you just started, you don't know everything. You haven't done the trainings, right? Should you start a podcast then? I just don't believe it's worth it at that moment. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring up a good point that I want to touch on, and then I'll give you my reason as well, which is a little bit different. But you said that people come on and they're surprised that we've gotten so many downloads, and that doesn't even count YouTube and the tracking that you can't do. That people are like, what's going on here? Well, what's your secret? And like you said, it's just marketing. And we know marketing. So to get back to the beginner who might be in this industry to get traffic or grow their brand, it's like if you don't know marketing yet, then your podcast probably won't do a whole lot because you have to market your podcast. And if we don't even market it that hard, but we rely on some of our techniques and tactics that we know where the low hanging fruit is. But it just goes back to one of my favorite sayings. It's like you're not in the business you're in the business of marketing the business that you are in. So if you're in the business of podcasting, guess what? You're in the business of marketing that podcast if you wanted to do anything and get any reach. So I think that's an excellent point. And one of my reasons is goes back to what I said earlier about the value of the podcast. If you haven't built up some sort of authority to get to the point where you can have 5 or 6 episodes or whatever, then it's going to be really hard to get guests on. But also, even now, we don't get a ton of reach, but the people who watch my podcast are the people who are already in my list, already in my audience, and I can reach them with this long form content. So if you haven't even if you don't even have a good lead generation strategy yet that's bringing you consistent leads, like then there's no one to nurture. And that's really what podcasting is all about: connections, networking, learning, of course, and then nurturing your existing audience and just keeping them engaged, right? Like, hey, yeah, you opted onto my list. Check this out. It's free. There's nothing for sale. Go listen to it. Just staying in the forefront of people's mind. And that's really the true value of a podcast. And once again, back to the beginner. If you don't have any leads yet, you don't have anybody to nurture. So focus on the marketing aspect first, right?
Yeah. Another thing will be also, if you're thinking about starting a podcast just to make money and get rich and blow up, it's not going to happen probably. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time, especially if you don't know, the marketing, this is a complete different business model, right? Even me and you, we don't know how to monetize it right there. Like we probably know kind of the route, but we don't know how we're going to make money, in the future of this, and that's something that we got to think about, because we do have so many episodes. And how do we get sponsors? Is it even worth having sponsors? maybe we should create our own our own course about podcasting, right? And then sell it in this podcast. Maybe that's a different route of monetization. But I don't know, we don't really know which route to take. I know we haven't really talked about it much, but this is our 52 episodes. It's been a year. It's been a year since we're doing this, and I think that's something that we're gonna have to talk about soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, we may as well. I mean, we're going to continue to do this, and it's continuing to grow, and every week, every month, we get more subscribers on YouTube. We get more people on the email list for the podcast. Which, if you're listening to this and you want to be on that, just go to evolvedmarketingpodcast.com. You can get on our email list, and we don't send out offers. All we do is just every Wednesday we give you a brief synopsis of the episode and remind you that it just went live. Just kind of a little reminder, and that's it. We send one email a week just to remind you. But that's growing, and yeah, I think podcasting courses might be a way to go. At some point we're going to want to monetize this, not to take the fun out of it or take the value out of it, but just to offer some more value. And I think that can be a great opportunity, because after 52 episodes we've learned a lot of things you don't want to do. And in the beginning, in our first 3 weeks, we were just scrambling to get this thing set up. Like, we didn't know anything. And there's a lot of Googling and asking questions and reaching out to other people to figure it out. Now we pretty much got down the process where we show up an hour and get the episode done, and it just gets published, and it's good to go. And that's all just been streamlined. And it's just stuff we've learned over doing 52 straight episodes. So maybe that is something that we'll offer in year two. Me, the marketer, I've had the domain name for the course for over a year now. We're just trying to figure it all out first. So that could be an opportunity. But once again, it'll be a learning experience, and
Yeah.
we'll see where it goes.
And that could be, our next little project, together. Our first project together is, of course, starting the podcast, and we already accomplished that. So now what's next? What's the next step? So I don't know. It's super interesting if we do create like a course, a program for the podcasting people that want to start a podcast. Basically, it would be super cool to actually do that and just expand our credibility even more, right? Because we're in the market of marketing, but now we can just go in different business models like podcasting. I know you're doing MRR as well on the side. This could be another different thing. And then also, just how you say, in the beginning we had no idea what what we were doing. We started Googling it. We started looking at like, what does RSS feed means, and then I remember when we published our first episode, we're like, okay, how is it gonna go to Apple? How is it gonna go to Spotify? I was like, okay, is it going to Amazon or Google? Like, we had no idea where where our episode was going, but then little by little it started popping off here and there and here and there. And we do have a software that takes care of the whole everything. But when we first hit the first publish, we were like, I don't know if this is gonna go through, if the computer's gonna blow up. Like I
Yeah,
had
at
no
that point
idea
we
how
didn't know
how
if
everything
anybody
was
was ever
gonna
going to
go.
be able to find it, or we didn't know.
Yeah, and then the cool thing about it is that once it was on Spotify, we started looking. Okay, Spotify takes maybe like 10 minutes to load up in Spotify. Then I think Apple was like 45 minutes later, and then Amazon was like a different time. And it was cool how little by little we started noticing those patterns. Like, okay, we know it's gonna be a little later. When you send the email, you send the email a little later in the day just to make sure it's already publishing all those platforms. And of course, you have YouTube. YouTube is amazing. It just gets published right away. Um, but yeah, it's just those little things that we didn't think about. We are like, okay, this might not be working. So we had to just Google and just we did our own research. We didn't buy a course about podcasting. We definitely did not do that.
Probably would have
We
been
talked to
easier if
some
we
people
did, though.
that, yeah, it would be so much easier if we did. Definitely. But in the beginning, we were in the trenches. We were Googling, we were learning it. We were editing our own stuff. We were editing the long form, editing the short form, doing everything through Zoom. We all got new mics. We got different cameras. I didn't know we had the cameras already. Thankfully, we had at least some equipment. But it's just those things we didn't think about it when we were talking that night, about the podcast. We didn't think about all of this stuff. We were just like, okay, we're action takers. We're just gonna go straight to it and and then figure it out as we go, and we did.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was, yeah, we didn't know we were getting ourselves into, but we committed to it and we went for it. And that's probably something that I want to talk about next, if we could, is podcasts, right? If you're going to start a podcast, if you're a beginner who's like, I've gotten to the point where I feel like I need a podcast or I want a podcast, or alternatively, maybe you are a more experienced marketer who's like, I need to start a podcast. And then you did what most people do and filmed 3 or 4 episodes and then gave up, or were incredibly inconsistent, where it's every 2 weeks and then every 3 months and you miss one. One of the biggest tips that I can give you is you just find a partner to do it with, because that has been such a blessing. I didn't want to say it's a blessing, because I probably would have never started a podcast if I didn't have a partner talking me into it, but it's made it so much easier. I don't feel like the weight of the world's on my shoulders with this podcast. Even when we were getting started, it was like, all right, Andrei, you do this, I'll do this. We figured things out separately, and it just accelerated the process. And there's the accountability factor too. Like there's days like last week, I filmed an episode while I was on vacation. Would I have done that if I was by myself? Probably not. But I was like, all right, well, I got Andrei's ready to do it that week. I'll make it happen. And I made it happen. It was no big deal. It's like the worst part about doing something and staying consistent is like the mental grind of doing it. If you have that accountability, it's like someone's telling you have to be here because I'm going to be here. It's like easy. I mean, all I got to do is show up for an hour and talk. I love talking. So finding a partner is pretty cool. And the great thing about podcast is if you have a partner that you trust, like we kind of have gone back and forth. Like we didn't start this to make money. So it was like, there was no real pressure of like, all right, we got to set up the bank accounts and the LLC, and we got to make sure this is going here, and we got to make sure we put money into it. It was just kind of like, we'll just figure it out. Because it's not designed to make a ton of money. It's not direct response marketing. It's not like, hey, we're going to create this episode and try to sell a bunch of crap. However, we can both use this individually once it's published to sell our stuff through our list by, once again, adding the trust. So having a partner in this has been amazing, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's thinking about starting a podcast.
Yeah, we had some previous guests, and you actually give them those tips. Like it's easier doing it with somebody else. Just like you say, we as human beings, we're so stuck in our minds sometimes, and we are our own worst enemies. You get me? So it's the moment that you don't want to be consistent, the moment where you lack motivation, then you're just gonna shut down the whole project. You're not gonna keep going after that. You could be the most positive person ever, but if you lack some type of motivation or some type of accountability, then you're just gonna throw it all to the ground, and you're not gonna keep going. So it makes a lot of sense what you say. That's one of the biggest tips. If you can find a partner that works, and you guys don't have to be similar. You guys don't have to, agree on everything, because we sometimes don't agree on some stuff, but we just, work together. We learn how to work together very well. And even from the beginning, we always work together well. So that's something cool that happened with us. I think we got lucky in that sense, and we became perfect partners, I guess you can say, for this project.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's like a marriage, you know what I mean? It's if you and your spouse are identical people, it probably won't last long term. They say opposites attract or whatever, and I think there's a lot to that. My wife and I are fairly opposite people. I mean, we share the same interests. We both like going on vacations, the same type of places. We like going to the same type of restaurants. And we have the same type of views about raising children and stuff like that. So that's obviously important, just like you and I have similar businesses and the same type of ideas about marketing and stuff. So that absolutely has to be there. But yeah, there's also the opposites as well. Like my wife is totally one way about like thinking about things and planning, and I'm totally another type of way, and the way we handle stresses is totally different. And I think that's why we work together so well as a marriage, is because we balance each other out. And that's, I think, what we do, Andrei, is we balance each other out. And so if you can find someone, it doesn't have to necessarily be your best friend or someone who's like, yep, they do everything the exact same as me. You just have to have similar interests and common interests to speak about.
Yeah. Speaking of vacation, are we gonna go to Peru next year? What's gonna happen?
Yeah, so there was this talk about us going to Peru because obviously that's where Andre's from, and filming an episode there. And hey, wouldn't that be cool if that could be a business expense from the income of the podcast next year? But to answer your question, my family was on vacation last week at the beach, and we were there with another family, and we started talking about different vacations, and they're going to Europe this in a couple months or a couple weeks, I guess now. And we started talking about Peru and Machu Picchu, and I mentioned how you had mentioned that there might be a possibility that in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, like you won't be able to go up there anymore because of the traffic. They'll shut it down, they'll restrict access, or at the very least, there'll be a very limited number of passes every year. So obviously, it'll be tens of thousands of dollars to go see it. So I was talking about that. I was saying, well, hey, this other family wanted to go to Machu Picchu. And I said, well, just so you know, I got some inside information that you might have to hurry. And I explained the story that you told me. And then I kind of blurted out, I think we're actually going next summer in front of my wife and my kids and with my podcast partner. And they all kind of looked at me like, are we? And I go, I think so. So basically, I'm pot committed now, Andre. I've already said it. So now my kids are ready to go, and my wife is like, "Oh, I want to go to Peru. That sounds great, especially if we have a local guide there." So I don't know. I think it's trending that way. To answer your question,
Yeah, little by little, you have to start, feeding it to your family, and then they're gonna be excited. I mean, the main thing is, I remember you had like a calendar, and then you could see Machu Picchu, right? And I
yeah,
think you show your son a picture of me and my family at Machu Picchu because we went, I believe it was last year, and he was just like, "Whoa!" Right?
yeah. He was like, "Oh my god, you know that guy?" I'm like, "Yeah, I talk to him every week," and that's kind of when I started seeding it. It's like the marketer inside of me can't help. It's like I'm not going to say, hey, can we go to Machu Picchu on day one? Just like you're not going to say, hey, go buy my $1,000 course on day one. But I was like, would you like to go there someday? Maybe, just could we? You know what I mean? And it just starts seeding it. And then, like I said, last week I dropped I think we're going to go next summer. And I was like, we are. So I'm just warming them up. I'm pre-framing them just like a good
Yeah.
marketer should do. I'm pre-framing them, warming them up. And then eventually I'll hit them with, well, we want to go. Flights are, $3,000 and we're going on. They're like, yeah, but I'll already have them warmed up and ready to go. So it'll be nice and easy. So
Yeah, you're getting ready right there. That's
yeah.
awesome. I mean, I think you guys will love it, honestly. People are cool. The food's amazing. The history, that's the main thing, the history, and that's why I love history so much. Just because I'm from a place where there's so much history, with the Incas and a bunch of different cultures, the Spaniards as well. But yeah, I believe you guys are gonna have a great time. We should definitely, follow through with this. I already talked to my wife too and everything because we kind of want to go back every year, especially for summer. I mean, we live in Texas, summers here, at least this summer, it was very, very hot.
Yeah, I screwed
So,
up too. We took our big family vacation in June, and that means July and August. I mean, we had other vacations, but that means pretty much July and August we were sitting baking in this heat. So I won't make that mistake again. So
yeah. And that's the best thing about it because over here, when it's summer over here, over there is winter. And the cool thing about Peru, when it's winter over there, is not rainy season. So it could be cold and chilly, but you're still gonna have clear skies. Not in Lima because Lima is a gloomy city. Lima is almost like Seattle, where it's always
mhm.
kind of gloomy. But if you go to Cusco, where is the city where Machu Picchu is, blue skies. It's cold, but blue skies. Not a single drop of rain. It's not a rainy season. Rainy season is during summer, and the seasons are opposite in here. So if it's winter here, it's summer over there. If it's summer here, it's winter over there. So that's the main thing that we need to escape this Texas
Yeah.
heat for sure.
I'm sure next summer we'll be looking for a dose of winter, so we'll have to go search that out. That sounds like a plan. I think we're getting closer. And that's the other thing we were talking about is we need to film a podcast episode while we're there. And looking ahead, that might be podcast episode 75 or 80, and luckily we have the confidence that we'll still be doing this. It might be episode 90 or 95 even. But I mean, how cool would that be if we get to the point where, this makes a little bit of money and we can just use those to pay for our trips. And that's another cool thing about podcasting. Maybe you're not in the make money online space, or maybe you're not a direct response marketer, but maybe you're sitting here thinking, I'm really interested in travel, or I'm really interested in visiting historic cities or countries,
Right.
not the big, like, oh yeah, we're going to go to LA, and then we're going to go to Venice, and then we're going to go to London, and then we're going to go to Sydney. Maybe you have more of an interest in what I would call niche cities or whatever, like off the grid a little bit, not off the grid. I guess that's a bad way, but not as much talked about. Right. Like in, maybe it's a, place that I live, Portland, right? I mean, obviously Portland got a big name, but maybe it's not, something everybody talks about, or, instead of, Cusco, is that how it's pronounced?
Cusco is the city, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody knows about Machu Picchu, but maybe you're more interested in diving in, seeing what Lima is like, or something with a little less name recognition. Or, a thousand other examples. You could turn that into a podcast where, even if you don't have the funds to travel yet, maybe you look in Facebook groups, maybe you look on the internet somewhere in the communities and try to find locals who are proud of their cities and proud of where they come from, or local guides who want to drum up business for people who come to, Raleigh, North
Yeah.
Carolina or whatever, you know what I mean? And you could reach out to them, get them on a podcast, learn about the city. I'm sure they have photos or things they could share, or B-roll video if they're a content creator. And you can start creating those podcasts through a passion. And then eventually, once you build up your audience, once you build up your YouTube, maybe you get monetized as a travel channel, then you can have income coming in where you can actually then go and afford through the business to go actually do these podcasts on demand. And that's how all these travel bloggers, or not all of them, because some of them have money, but that's how you can get started as a travel blogger or a travel podcaster. And you don't, like I just said, you just got to be creative. Find a way to get these stories and drum up interest. And you can do that all from Zoom in the corner of your bedroom if you want. And that'd be just really cool.
I mean, that's an actual great idea if somebody wanted to start a podcast about traveling and stuff like that. I mean, just how you said it, you don't have to know the place. But what if you just go to a place and you're in a great location and then just interview a tourist guide? Something as simple as them sharing the story of that location that you're at the moment, and then you also have to, of course, be kind of intrigued in learning, right? Because you're not gonna want to just do it and not be like, okay, but I don't really care about this place. You have to just be open-minded about every single place that you go to, and just record, interview somebody, ask questions, because you genuinely want to learn about that location. Also here in the United States, you know how people jump on a van and then they travel the United States in a van and they live the minimal lifestyle. You could turn that into a podcast as well, just talking about the locations that you've been. You park your van somewhere, you hit record, you start recording your podcast, and especially with the locals. If you are able to find a place where you see a lot of locals, that's so much great information and value that they can give you about the location that you are at. So that's a great. I might be thinking about it now.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing is, like, you can go, and that's awesome if you can, but if you can't, you can just search them out. People love talking about what they love, and there's a lot of great places. And I mean, you can do it with restaurants as well. I mean, imagine if you're that's your thing, because that's more like my wife and I, we love restaurants, and we met in the restaurant industry. It's like, what if I just like sent emails to chefs in different parts of the country? For example, maybe their restaurant got a little bit of press, or maybe they were on, an episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, or whatever food channel you look at, and say, hey man, I'd love to interview you about this, and just make it a little bit different. Like, hey, I know you posted your most famous dish on this, but what's your favorite dish? And I want to hear more about that. Not what's the most popular, but what's your favorite dish? I'd love to have you on a podcast, maybe 20, 30 minutes. They don't have to be an hour long. I'd love to sit and talk to you about it for 30 minutes, and we can do it via Zoom at your convenience. And then you could start building that. And what you could do is you can leverage other people's publicity to help your publicity as well. Just like we bring on marketers who have followings, and we hope they'll share their content with their audience. You can do the same thing with whatever you're interested in: restaurants, travel, people who, smoke meat and barbecue. You know what I mean? Like, how cool would it be to have a barbecue podcast? And you just find, like, I'm sure there's a way you can find a new restaurant, what new restaurants open in, say, Texas. And you can find a new barbecue restaurant that opens in Texas. If you reach out to them and say, hey, man, I'd love to have you on my podcast, they'd be like, well, hell yeah, that's free publicity. And then you could dive into like what makes you different and what's your favorite things to barbecue and what's going to be the specialty. And podcasts don't have to be super formal. They can just go around with their phone and show you what the restaurant looks like, or what. You just got to be creative. You got to basically, like you said, Andrei, figure out what you're interested in learning about and then create content out of it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just how you say, it doesn't have to be formal. I mean, we were in the hallway of Funnel Hacking Live, started recording our podcast, and then random people will show up. You get me? Not random people, like we kind of knew them, but they were. It's not like they were lined up waiting for us to go in. We just hit record, and then they will walk by, and I'm like, oh, I know that guy. Come over here, and then they will come over here, and then they start shooting the podcast. But yeah, there's so many great ideas that you guys can start. And just I mean, going back to the beginner, you just have to be willing to do it. I guess if you're a beginner, as long as you have that learning mentality, I'm sure you can do it. But most people don't. I mean, most people don't really have the motivation. A lot of people lack motivation. So if they want to start something, as long as they're intrigued about what they want to talk about, what they want to learn, they should definitely get started. Definitely.
And that's the thing. We have a marketing podcast because we love talking to marketers, and those are the people I gravitate towards. So I want to hear more about what they have to say. I'm not trying to force it. I'm not doing this to get more traffic to my products. And that's the same mentality everyone should have. Hey, find out what you're interested in, and just, it gives you a platform to invite people, experts on, where you can learn more about whatever drives you, man. I'm gonna start a fly fishing channel so I can learn about fly fishing and then get flown out to. Yeah, it's something I've always had in the back of my mind, Andrei. It's like when I'm to the point where either I no longer want to be in this industry, or I've made so much money that I can't possibly spend it all. I always thought, man, I'd love to have just like a little travel or food blog or something that's just super like passionate about, maybe cooking in my backyard, something like that. I always thought would be pretty cool, because once it hits, man, I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in those type of industries and blogs and stuff like that.
Yeah. Another perfect example is this lady. She was a speaker of Funnel Hacking. I remember. I don't know if you remember. I don't remember her name, but she's big on YouTube, right? With the air fryer.
Yeah, it was Kathy
right?
Yoder, right? Is that her name? Kathy Yoder?
There you go. Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. Well, she started her YouTube channel and started talking about air frying, cooking with the air fryer, the things that you can do with the air fryer. And this is an older lady, I don't know how old she is, but she made it happen just with her phone, literally. Like, she recorded most of her videos just with her phone, and then she started trending. She started making a lot of money just with like the YouTube AdSense, right? Just getting the publicity. And it's just little things like that, if you're passionate about something, just how you say, maybe you're passionate about fishing, you can definitely make that and monetize it with social media, especially with YouTube. I believe her tagline was something in the words of, she's making money, but then while she's making content while YouTube is paying her, something like that. Do you remember what was her tagline?
I don't remember.
Kind of like that, right?
She was like, yeah, instead of paying for ads or paying for traffic, get paid to generate leads. Is basically what her tagline was. And that's right. Exactly what happens, because now she has her digital cookbooks, and she might have physical cookbooks as well. And, she just gets all this free traffic. And I do want to touch on something that you said, is like, she started with her phone. Like, she would just literally like prop her phone up in her kitchen while she was making dinner for her kids. And she would just say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's a little trick. And that became this empire. And it reminded me of kind of a mutual contact / friend of ours, Michael. And he's on the Think Unbroken podcast. I was trying to look up his last name. I can't. Do you know what his last name is off the top of your head? I can't think of his last name.
No.
Yeah. Anyways, he's
Michael.
Michael with the Think Unbroken podcast, and his podcast
Yeah,
is huge now. And he's, talked to some amazing people and he's had some amazing partnerships out of it. But, anyways, not this previous funnel hacking live where we saw him, but 2 funnel hacking lives ago where we came up with the idea for the podcast. I started kind of picking his brain at dinner, not formally, but just like asking him questions about his podcast. And he said, yeah, he releases an episode every day. And I was like, you mean like Monday through Friday? He goes, every day. Okay. But then I started to look more into it and I saw him literally pull out his phone and just hit a voice note. And for 7 minutes, he talked into his phone, and that was an episode. I mean, here's a guy who's got a huge podcast that has a whole brand being built behind it and a whole empire. And that's good enough. Just talking into the phone.
yeah,
So if you can't do that, I mean, then you're not interested in the topic. I would think that don't worry about the production value is my point. The reason I wanted to bring that up. Air fry in your kitchen
exactly.
with your phone, talking to the voice notes, whatever it takes.
Yeah, I found her tagline, right? It says, "Wouldn't it be nice if instead of having to pay for ads, you get paid to create content?" And basically, she's just basically creating content on YouTube, and then YouTube is paying her for basically creating content. And then just how you say, she does everything with her phone. She's posting consistently, and she blew up. Like she has millions of followers. And just how you say, you don't need a bunch of money. You need to start with money. You just need some type of interest. You
Yeah, and
know.
what's interesting about her is she was also strategic though. She just started talking about whatever stuff she was doing, stuff she was cooking, but what that she realized is that the air fryer stuff was blowing up, so she did more of that. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of this. Just start creating content around your interests and let the algorithms, let the audience tell you what they want more of. And then you just doubled and tripled down on that.
And the funniest thing about it that she said while she was doing her speech was she hates cooking. Like she has a cooking channel and she hates cooking. Like she does not like it, but she is making money that way. I thought that was funny. And same thing, just how the same example with Michael, right? I think this last funnel hacking that we talked to somebody and they were saying that Russell used to do the same thing while driving his car, and he had his marketing, what is it called? Marketer secrets or
Well, yeah. So
his
the
podcast?
podcast is marketing secrets now, I believe, because that
Yeah.
follows congruency with his brand of expert secrets and traffic secrets. But I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I'm almost certain that podcast started with the title "Marketing in Your Car." And that's literally what he would do is he's like, well, I got a 20-minute drive to the office every day. So I'm just going to record my thoughts to be efficient with my time. And I'll call it marketing in my car. And he published it and launched it. And I mean, it was years of content. And then now it's marketing secrets and it's blown up and people know about it. But he just did it. It's like, I got time, not doing anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if you're willing to do it, you can make it happen.
Yep.
Definitely, definitely. So
Yep.
I think we're getting close to the end, right, Brian?
I think we gave some good cautionary tales about starting a podcast as far as what you might want to expect and what maybe you shouldn't expect, but also some many great reasons why, be it a podcast, be it a channel, just become a creator and take an interest. And, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we covered everything, huh?
Yep, sounds good. Well,
We
it was a pleasure to talk to you. Like always, like a usual. But yeah, listeners, thank you guys for listening. Watch us on YouTube, leave us a review, leave us a comments. If you guys want to hear some type of topics or you have questions for your own marketing, leave us those questions and we will definitely touch them on the next episode of Evolve Marketing Podcast.
Absolutely. And congratulations once again, Andrei, on 52 full year of episodes. Thanks to everybody who's listening as well. And we'll see you all on the next episode.